This is episode 40 of Everlasting Lucifer, and it's the last episode and the last chapter, which is called The River. I don't really have the time for this, Keitaki said. Vade looked at her. Her face was illuminated by the winter sun. She pulled her jacket close and sat cross-legged, self-contained. He took her hand and she smiled at him. Beyond her, the wind ruffled what looked like a large lake or an ocean. It was the river. Its currents went in different directions. Islands of water plants floated by. The sky was open and pale. The sun was sharp but not hot, and there was a winter wind. Below them, the main covered area of the ferry was crowded and noisy. Here on the roof it was pleasant. A loose knot of men sat playing cards near the open chimney pipe where it was slightly warmer. Keitaki had withdrawn her hand from Vade's. He folded his arms around his legs and watched the card players, looked at her. Her eyes were sometimes closed, and sometimes she seemed to be a part of the scene in front of him, to the side, behind him. The oblong ferry moved in a stately way. The river was calm, but the wind was agitated. White cranes flew past. Vade hunched and pulled his hands into his sweater sleeves. He allowed the adrenaline he'd felt from persuading Keitaki to do something, anything at all, to dissipate. It was inevitable that she'd accept a small amount of affection and then pull away. Still, she was here, and he looked at her, watched her listen to the card players, then tune out of their conversation, and felt love. He looked at the ragged hem of his sweater, the turn-ups of his jeans, and had vain, Vade-like thoughts, but also enjoyed having left behind a life of lists and perpetual mollusk-like acquisition. Here he was with his once good and now fucked jumper, his frayed jeans, and his hopes. He might have to stand here as himself, without armor. Keitaki's eyelids were closed. In the sun, her face became rosy. She opened her eyes. "Winter sun is tiring," she murmured. "You want to sit in it and get warm, but it drains you." She rubbed her face, and the lines of smoke under her eyes smudged. She twisted round, one hand on her knee. "Ah," she said, "we're nearly there." The passengers were getting ready to disembark. Those on the roof waited, and as the others poured out of the covered deck, the roof dwellers began to jump down. Vade offered Keitaki a hand. So this was Majuli, he thought, as the ball of his right foot touched the soil. An island in the river that was the moving blood of Assam. Maybe Majuli was the quintessence of the place, a heart. Or did he think that later? Keitaki explained to the young taxi driver where they wanted to go. She and Vade sat in the back of the Maruti van, its windows open. He held her hand and looked onto green paddy fields, the brown and white birds he sometimes saw in Guwahati, the sound of bells and singing beautiful young people, boys and girls, faces alive, returning in their school uniforms. Older men in dhoti and gamusa, people straight-backed, yet gentle in their bearing. There was some discussion between Keitaki and the driver. He was saying he thought he might not be able to go all the way to Horenda's place. That was the owner of the cottages where they would stay. The van arrived at a small crossroads where a few men sat near a bus stop and a new cement Shiv temple, drinking tea. The driver leaned out to talk to them. Keitaki put her head out of the window too. She said a few words in her clear, joyful voice, and a ripple of happiness went through the men. The conversation, which was about whether the van would make it over the bamboo bridge through a flooded field, changed from being one about difficulty, and evaporated into laughter. "What did you say?" Vade asked when the driver restarted the engine. They began to go down a small lane next to the flooded field. "Our friend here was worried that the vehicle would be too heavy for the bridge," she said. "It's a light bridge, mainly for crossing on foot." "What did you tell him?" Vade said. Keitaki smiled. "I told him we are not heavy people, that we are easy and light," she murmured. "I hope that's true," Vade said. She looked at him, light as a pinprick, opened her mouth as if about to speak, and then glanced away. The van trundled over the fragile bridge, the bamboo creaking. A motorbike passed in the other direction. The driver tutted. But they got to the village and drove through it, more bamboo huts, older trees, to reach the gate of the cottages. "Well," said Keitaki, as they returned to the little veranda of their bamboo cottage after dinner, "this isn't going to work." She popped into the room and turned off the outside light, just as Vade removed one insect from his eye, another from his mouth. "Dessert," he said, "I guess." "Actually, tribals do eat a lot of insects," Keitaki said. "For example, silkworms, boiled in the cocoon and then fried." She sat down on the steps. "Have you tried them?" "Oh, no, I couldn't, but they're meant to be delicious." Vade laughed. Iridescent beetles periodically crashed into his face. He leant against the railing of the balcony and looked down at her. "Where are your rollies?" he inquired. "I stopped," Ketaki said. "They made me feel sick. Sometimes the thought of them was lovely. But really, Vade, I realize that the less I do to my body or to myself, the happier I am." She laughed. "I've even been growing some nice leg hair. I didn't have time to go and get waxed. The women I work with tell me to do something about myself. But I'm just so happy." She leant against the railing too, and Vade stroked her head for a moment. "Look at the moon," Ketaki said. "There are all these superstitions about not going out at night. Ghosts. Things come and get you. Should we go inside?" "No, I may wish to give my soul to the moon." "Right," Vade said. "Look at it." The moon was huge, pale gold, incredibly bright. Ketaki sat gazing upwards as though receiving a transmission. "I'm glad you're happy," Vade said eventually. "Can you tell me more about it?" "Let's go for a walk," Ketaki said. She was up already and walking away. "Now, in the dark?" He followed her. "Haven't you seen the moon? But it's the countryside, there's no other light at all. What worries you more, Vade, the ghosts, or tripping and twisting her ankle?" They let themselves out of the gate and closed it behind them, then turned to walk up the mud lane that led to a crossing. "I think the river is this way," Ketaki said. "You think that we're having a private nighttime moment," she went on, "but you don't know what a village is like. Tomorrow, everyone we meet will know that we're the crazy foreigners who went out in the middle of a full moon night." "You're not a foreigner." "I am here." "Do you mind that, the scrutiny of people, in the village where you are?" Vade had forgotten its name. "I did," Ketaki said. She was walking slightly ahead of him, but she stopped, to his surprise, to take his hand. "For a while," she said. "I tried to fit in, sit back, understand how things worked." "That makes sense," Vade said. "Yes, but it wasn't really me," Ketaki said, "and then I figured out how to make things work, how to achieve, I wouldn't say efficiency, but something." "So, what did you do?" Vade asked. "Well, I got people to start doing things for me, little errands, teaching them how I liked things to be done. I guess I was creating an environment in which I could be comfortable. They liked it." "Okay," Vade said. He could only half listen. Ketaki was holding his hand. Hers was warm and dry. She became alert. "Vade," she said. "Yes?" Her hand tightened. He squeezed back. "I want to be close to you, then something always happens." He stopped. They were about halfway along the path raised above a rice field. It seemed as though they might reach the river by continuing till a tall hedge of trees and then turning either left or right. "You can just be an idiot at times," Ketaki continued. Vade sighed. He looked down at her hand in the moonlight. "You can," she said. "Look," said Vade, "how do you deal with the people you work with, now that things are going better?" Ketaki let go of Vade's hand and put hers in her pockets. She began to walk again. "I let them be the way they are," she said. "I don't expect that much, but I'm teaching them what I like. They can be lazy or ineffective, but they're just starting to experience that things work better when they try to do what I want, because I'm not in this for myself. They're like leaves on a tree that think," she began to laugh, "that they have some independent existence. Maybe we're all like that." She paused. "I don't know which way it is. Let's try this way." She had it right. Vade went along. "People love to do things for you," he said. "It's good that you're letting them." "Oh, really?" She turned back. "Yes, even me. What do you think I'm doing here?" "I don't know. A time out? An adventure? We aren't really your business, are we? You and me?" "Us, here, in Assam." Vade followed her. Here, in the shade of the trees, there was so much less light. Ketaki's figure, a little ahead, was nebulous, a contingent presence, not a physical object. He thought of her body in bed, sleeping, or fucking. She felt then like an emotion, a field of energy, not a simple animal, even when she was doing corporeal things like coming or bleeding every month, or farting. He thought of the smell of her scalp, or the weight of her body when, once in a while, she slept on his chest. They came to the end of the hedge. A little ahead was the river and a grassy bank, brilliantly lit by the full moon. Ketaki turned back to Vade, before moving on to, as it were, the bright stage. "You know, Vade, most of the happiness in my life has come from inside, not from other people. Often it's been despite other people." She walked onto the bank, first sand, then grass, and sat down. Vade sat next to her. The river was louder in the dark. It made animal and beyond animal noises, rushed and sucked. The moon shone down, cool, posthumous. Vade had the urge to fight his corner, but also the sense that nothing he did this night would count. "What would make it possible for you to be with me?" he asked. Keiteki exhaled. "The belief that I wouldn't be angry with myself in the long run," she said eventually. Vade looked at the moonlit water softly flowing. Currents everywhere agitated the surface. An island of greenery floated past. Something, an alligator? Probably a log. "I don't know if I'd think of it that way," he managed. "Yes, but what matters to me is how I think about it," Keiteki said. Vade waited. He prayed. Something came. "I think maybe that's the mistake," he said. "Isn't it about a shared sense of things? And while we're on the subject of my sometimes being an idiot..." Keiteki turned to him. "I think it might be more helpful to think of me as generally an idiot," said Vade. She laughed. "That's good, but you don't believe it." Vade tried to do his best with words. Sincerity, despite its reputation, wasn't helping. "I do in a way," he said. "From your point of view, and not only yours, I often have been an idiot. Intermittently, but quite a lot. I'm sorry. I'll try to do better." He looked Keiteki in the face as far as possible. She sat with her back to the moon, and her face was only gleams of light and areas of darkness. "I'll probably fuck up repeatedly. I mean, I will. I'll piss you off. I won't betray you, though, if that matters." "Apropos that, Vade," Keiteki said quietly, "and thank you for the declaration. Is there anything you want to tell me about the last few months, your life in Guwahati? I mean, anything to do with someone I know?" "What?" Vade said. "Tara." "Tara?" "Oh, come on, the woman who always wears hot pants." Vade laughed. "Oh, yes, that was weird. She invited me to drop in any time for tea, so I said the same thing back, but then she actually did come over. She asked to look round the flat and then suddenly stood very close to me and said I must get lonely." Keiteki shrugged. "Subtlety doesn't always pay." Vade said, "I have been lonely, but I just got defensive and told her I like spending time on my own. Maybe that's becoming true." He hesitated. "She got on my nerves with her giggling and flicking her hair, and also she said it was so sweet that I was waiting for you, but she didn't think you were home alone thinking about me, if I knew what she meant." "Wow," Keiteki said. "Well, are you saying you haven't slept with anyone else since you've known me, or even since I've been here?" "No, I'm not saying that," said Keiteki. "I don't..." Vade fell back on his elbows. "What are we doing right now?" he said. "I suppose we came here partly to look for Tuku," she said, "though I can't imagine we'll find him if he doesn't want to be found. Things change. People. It's unimaginable, but that's how it is. And we came here to see, I think, if we, you and I, can do this, be together." She touched the fraying cuff of his sweater sleeve and held his wrist. He took her hand. "Yes," he said, "we can. I think it would help if you took it at face value that I want this. I'm not perfect, but I don't want anyone else. I do want you. You might have to..." "Train you." Vade shrugged. "Basically, what is it you need from me?" "Loyalty," she said at once. "Look, with Tara, that was... I know why she pursued you. She loves attention and she has a bit of a thing about me. But why did you respond?" Vade thought about it. "I thought you weren't thinking of me as a boyfriend. I guess I wanted to maintain some independence. And I was a bit lonely, though it didn't really help. But nothing happened." He laughed. "When I asked about her boyfriend, she explained that most of Guwahati is sleeping with someone, just not their own partner." Keiteki laughed. "That's not bad, and not untrue." She sighed. "I can understand it, Vade. About Tara. I don't like it, though." "Maybe that's a good thing," Vade said. "I don't like the men you've been sleeping with." "Friends, Vade." "Whatever, I'm not offering to beat them up, but I might have to give them hard stares." She smiled. "Do that." He leant over to kiss her. She kissed him back, and then a moment later slapped his cheek. "That's probably fair," Vade said. "Yes." "We're not a perfect fit or whatever, you know," Keiteki murmured. She drew back. "I don't want to be spanking you. I don't want to be some corporate wife or whatever creepy fantasy you have." "Great," Vade said. "And what about you?" she said. "What are you going to do with your life? Just when I find a sense of purpose, you go all floppy. Is this your plan? Flaking around and pretending to learn Assamese? How is that going, by the way?" Her laugh was throaty. "Oh, soliase, Baido," said Vade. Keiteki laughed. "That was almost convincing. I'm not sure you can carry on calling me Baido, though." Vade perked up. "No?" he said. She laughed, then sighed. "No," she said. "Come with me." Elsewhere on the island, in a room also made of bamboo, a man in a red t-shirt sat quietly, cross-legged. The remains of the cooking fire still smouldered. It wasn't yet light. He was in meditation in the hour and a half before dawn. Through him ran a current of pure life, joyous as the first iteration of a river in the mountains after it springs from the earth, when freedom and closeness to the ground are not yet enemies. Beside him, attached to a bare fitting at the end of a single wire, burned a light bulb. As he meditated, the sparks danced.